I'm just pulling the headlights and the park lights and the indicators out of the new Landy because they're absolutely poked. They're not worth playing with. These things are 100% plastic, and believe it or not, when they warm up in the hot sunshine, the bulbs pop out. The little recesses that the bayonets go into are only just deep enough, and as they expand in the hot sun, the bulbs just drop out. This is what so many of the later model Defenders seem to have retrofitted. Now, I've never seen them operating. I've no idea how successful it's going to be, but I'm prepared to give it a go because these things are honestly like candles. One thing I'm going to do as soon as I've got this headlight out is put a multimeter on the wires and just see how much voltage I get. Now, these are a dull yellow. In this light, there's no point in turning them on and showing you, but on the voltmeter, I'm sure that I'm going to be around 9 or 10 volts, which is just pathetic. And why would a 12-volt battery be giving 9 volts at the light? Well, to put it simply, I think it's just British design. No relays. They run the power from the battery all the way up the steering column to the high-low beam switch, and then all the way down through the engine bay and out to the headlight, and there's losses. Modern vehicles, they all have a bank of relays. Everything's relayed. The horn, the wipers, the headlights, everything that draws a significant amperage gets relayed. So that way it's got nice fat wires and it draws the power directly from a good strong source instead of going all the way through meters and meters of wire and a whole lot of switches and contacts. So in my humble opinion, I think it's one of the best things that you could do to your Land Rover is to pack it full of relays. Right, it's now 2 hours later. The roads are getting busy outside because it's a sunny Friday afternoon. Everybody's going to the beach. It's taken me 2 hours to find my multimeter. Yeah, I know. What I'm going to do now is turn the sound off, and I'm going to bring the camera in close, and I'm going to show you the kind of voltage drop that these awful old girls have. Oh, sorry, old girl. This is Martin. Okay, we'll call that 12.31. Let's go and see what there is with the headlights. Oh well, it's marginally better than I thought it was going to be. 11.1. So it's about 1.5 volts down, which is actually quite a lot. Seeing as a flat battery is 11 volts, we're losing half our voltage getting to the headlights. So anyway, like I said, I've been out and got these. The courier's been and dropped everything else off, so I've got all these bits. This is a full set of the felt window tracks that go around all the sliding windows. That'll cut down on a lot of rattles and keep the wind out. These are the headlight fascias, one for each side, and a pair of lovely heavy duty rubber mud flaps. I got myself a full stainless steel door hinge kit. That's every door hinge on the vehicle, all in stainless steel. It keeps it looking nice. And lots of LED bulbs of all descriptions, from the dashboard through to the headlights, tail lights and number plate light. New wipers, new windscreen washer nozzle. What have we got in here? Relays. Got myself 4 relays because there are relays missing and things not operating. New tail lights, new indicators, new park lights, all the way around. Do the lot, make it look pretty. It's going to be so nice to have decent YPAC original equipment lighting. Now, when you take headlights out, there are 3 sets of bolts. You've got your adjusters that I'm showing you here. And then you've got your bolts that, well, screws actually, that screw the whole bucket into the guard. And then you have a bezel only fits one way. These three aren't equidistant. And the reason for that is because they want to ensure that no matter how uncoordinated you are, you can only get the bezel to fit with the drain hole at the bottom. So it only goes on one way. That will locate the drain hole, and that will make sure that you won't get too much rust in your bucket. But after 40 years, you're bound to get some. So there's your little drain hole in the bottom. I'm going to be stripping all these units down and repainting them. But first things first, I've got to get everything working so that I can get this thing legally on the road. Now, when you're working on Lucas wiring with those bullet connectors, you are going to need some kind of penetrating fluid because they're dry and they stick together incredibly well. A little squirt of this stuff makes it so that you can just give them a quarter twist and unplug them with your fingers. But the accessibility in here is not easy. You've got to take your headlight out to get your park lights out. The series was simpler. There's less stuff on a series. The Defender's more complicated, so there are many more times on a Defender where you have to get things unbolted or bolted back in a precise order. Otherwise you find that you can't do it later. What you can't see happening right now, and what I haven't seen happening right now yet, is that the new plastic bezels I've got that go around the headlights, they have to go under the indicator and park lights, whereas the old ones, they went over, which meant that the hole was larger. You could just pass it over the lens and they would provide a nice backdrop. But these new ones that I've got, I haven't even taken them out of the bags yet, and I haven't realised that the holes are much smaller, and you've got to put them on and thread the wires through and then get the headlight in before you can actually fit the bezels. So it's a palaver, it really is, and so much on a Land Rover is a palaver. More remedial work. Yeah, this is somebody else's work. The wires have been trapped in behind something. I don't know what. I'm going to cut them off and remake them at this length. Doesn't matter if they're just a fraction shorter. But this would have been one of my problems of an intermittent headlight. So I'll get all the awful stuff off and then I'll just strip these back. God, this wiring is a little bit old and crusty in the front. But it's almost $2,000 for a new wiring loom. It's awesome that you can buy everything still after all these years. A 1985 vehicle, and you can get everything from door handles to a spare ashtray to a full wiring harness, or even a complete new galvanized chassis. Everything's available. Ugh, I can see that the wire is quite tarnished. That's something I'm finding on this vehicle again and again. Everything that's copper seems to be heavily tarnished. I'm wondering if this thing lived a portion of its life around Rotorua and actually got parked pretty close to one of the thermal vents, because the fuse box also had nasty wiring in it. But I'm going to show you a little trick shortly. So here we are with a little bit of citric acid in the container, and I'm just going to dip the ends of these three wires into here and leave it for 5-10 minutes. Go and do something else, and when I come back they'll be bright and clean and ready to solder, because I want to make my headlights as good as I possibly can without spending any money.
So having citric acid around is a really useful thing for de-rusting and cleaning parts. In various concentrations you can do all sorts of things with it. There we go. 3 nice clean copper wires ready to be soldered up. While I've got the headlight bucket in my hand, I'll just show you these adjusters. You can't buy them. If they get damaged, then you've got to braze a tiny little washer to a screw, which is an awkward little job to do. So look after them. There's 2 of them on the bucket, and they're opposite that little screw that I just... Sorry, they're opposite that little spring that I just showed you. So they will... One will adjust up and down, the other will adjust in and out. The 2 lighting units are identical, with the exception of the colour of the wiring for identification and the colour of the lens. One of them of course is clear, that's your park side light, and the other one is your turn signal indicator, being orange. It's traditional to have the park lights at the top and the indicators at midway point, but there are no rules. I've seen Land Rovers assembled with them different on both sides. Once you've got your 2 lights connected and you're satisfied that you've got all your wires the right way around, you can then get the 3 wires from the headlight and commence plugging those in. Those are the ones that are the blue coded. You've got a blue wire with a red tracer and a blue wire with a white tracer. That's high beam and low beam. You can see those in the picture there. The green one is the indicator, the red is the park light, and the blacks of course, they're your individual earths. So fitting the headlights, once again you've got 4 screws here. Really good idea to use stainless steel if you can lay your hands on it. Make sure that the headlight's orientated the right way up. I think these 4 screws are equidistant, so if you're really dumb you could get it a quarter of a turn or even half a turn out.
Right, well that's the dash. Right, well that's the dash mostly stripped. I've got a few bits undone, but they're still trapped because I've got to undo other things. There really is a strict order that things have to be assembled and disassembled in on a Land Rover, otherwise you end up doing the job 3 times virtually, because you suddenly realise that you can't get this on, and then because now you put that on, so all that's got to come off again to get the last screw in type of situation. Now another problem that these things have is big guys driving Land Rovers into trees or banks. When somebody's large and their knees are up here and a Land Rover comes to a sudden stop, the dashboard gets the old knee in the nuts, and this dashboard is smashed into about 7 or 8 pieces, and that plastic surround is unavailable in New Zealand. I'd have to send to England for it, and that's going to cost me something like $250, £130 by the time it gets here. So I'm going to do my best to replicate. I'm going to glue in the bits that I can find, put some of the tabs back on so I can bolt it back in, and then I'm going to do my best to replicate this corner. I know it's going to be a bit of fun, but we'll see how that goes. But the main job for today, after my little burn up when I took this thing down the road 2 days ago, did I tell you about that? Thing is, you see, there was some alternative wiring that had been done. It was as if the ignition had been hot wired almost, because there'd been a prior issue. And for some reason, that new wire shorted out on something. What it shorted out on, I haven't found yet. But Martin spluttered to a halt, and I climbed out and realised what had happened. So I then thought, well, where's a long piece of wire that's not currently being used? So I cut into the wiring loom in the rear door, which goes to the windscreen wiper, the windscreen washer, high stop brake light, and the heated rear windscreen. all of which currently don't work anyway. So I cut out a length of wire about that long, brought it down the front, redid the wire that they had redone. Don't know where it shorted, as I say. Redid the wire that they had done and fired it up and continued on my way. Now I've got to pull all this out to find the problem, because there's no point in just bodging up a bodge up. I want to get this fixed, so I'm going right through the dash with a photocopied and self-laminated wiring diagram. It's called a composite diagram, all models and all markets, so it's going to have extras in it like fog lamps and cigarette lighters and probably electric heated seats and things like that. But just ignore those and follow the basics. What I'm interested in is finding out where the big fat white wire that's been warmed up goes to from here, and then finding out how damaged it is on the other end, and then I'll make a decision as to whether I cut the whole loom open and replace that piece, or whether I just put a bit of tape around it. So I'm not going to make you watch this, it's going to be boring as hell, but for the rest of the day this is what I'm working on. If there's any developments or small fires, I'll come and get you. Well, it's 6:30. It's a good 8 or 10 hours since I started videoing this, and thank goodness I didn't have you hanging around through it all. But I'll show you around in a moment, and I'll show you what I found behind here. But first I'll tell you about what I've been doing. I've been doing a whole mixture of jobs. I've been repairing the burnt out wiring behind the fuse box, traced it back to where it hadn't burnt, and then joined on a new piece, soldered that heat shrink over the top, and then saved the terminal from the other end and reattached it to a new piece of wire and got that back into the fuse box. So that's a repair that you can't tell has been done. And just tidied up a few other things, took out the 32mm fuses and replaced them with 30mm fuses. Who'd believe there were two sizes so close together? And the 32s won't fit into this holder. Yeah, so I've done that. Found lots of broken plastic. This instrument binnacle is made of unobtainium, and as you might know, unobtainium is very brittle and breaks when you bash it with your knees. So not much leg room in these things. When somebody headbutts the windscreen, their knees hit this, smashes it to bits. I've had it on a few others that I've done. Can't buy them. So I've found all the pieces that were floating around behind the dashboard and down in the vent system, and I've rebuilt it where I could, and now I've got a structure to work off, and this gap has become about 20% smaller because I've glued this piece back in. I'm now going to find a way of replicating this, and there's two ways I can do it. I can use some foil tape, which is used in the air ducting industry. It's an adhesive, fairly stiff aluminium foil tape, and I'll tape over the crack, make it close to how I want it, and then I'll use a product that was invented here in New Zealand by a lady friend of mine's husband. My claim to fame, Newtec Bog car automotive filler. Now Newtec is used by panel beaters for bridging gaps, doing body rust repairs mainly, but it's waterproof, it's strong, it's part way towards JB Weld, but it's also got fibres through it, so it bridges gaps well. Far stronger than the ordinary talcum powder polyester resin bog that we're used to for filling dents in cars. This stuff's quite high tech, and I don't know whether it's available in the rest of the world, but I know the lady whose husband invented it. Anyway, what I'm going to do is either use that to form this new piece, but I won't be able to do it to the same thickness. It will need to be maybe 6mm, quarter of an inch thick to have any strength. But that doesn't matter. There's oodles of clearance in behind here, and I'll just Dremel in the recess to make it fit over this piece here. So the wiring, oh hang on, one other bit of plastic. This part here is the edge that goes over the top of the dash here, and this becomes brittle. This has also been kneed, and this end was broken. I found one of the pieces. I'm going to do the same trick here. I'm going to bridge it with this tape and then bog it with New Tech from in behind, and then I'll have to spray paint, maybe the whole thing, and just see how it looks. I'll take some of the scuffs out of this too and tidy it up. But in taking all the stuff off, I've discovered that there's rust in this top flange here. So I'm going to tape up the windscreen, and I'm going to sandblast and wire brush that, and then rust kill it. Try and get that done. This deserves a new coat of satin black, so I'll take this off in the vents and do that. Looks like I'm stripping the whole dash. Now that's good, because this bottom half of the dash is also what they call the plenum chamber. It's a duct that carries air from the heater blower down there and brings it along the front of the dash and down at your feet. They're not particularly well painted. They're sucking in moist air from cold rainy nights all their lives that they're working, so they get rusty inside, and this one's particularly rusty. So I'm going to take this piece off, which is covered in vinyl on the outside, but it's bare tin on the inside. I'm going to give it a light sandblast, rust kill it, see if I can save it. If not, I'm going to have to make a new one, and it's not quite within the capabilities of my folder. My folder is not wide enough to take this because it goes way over to here. So it looks like I'll have to pay somebody else to put the folders in for me, and then I'll do the shaping on the top here, if it has to be done. But getting that off is a good excuse to call this a proper resto. I'm going to be stripping this down to a bare firewall. I might as well in that case do the rust repair in the footwell. I'll be on the lookout for a new screen because it's got 2 bullet holes in it up here from stones at Roadworks. But there's a lot to do. This thing has been so well used. It's been kept going, and that's it. I think it must have been used off-road on a farm, because none of the warning lights, all of the bulbs are blown, all the fuses were wrong and missing or blown, so nothing was really working. And one of the problems is, now that I've put new fuses in, I've found that there's crazy things going on. I can have one headlight or the other. I can't have both at the same time, so that worries me. I'm going to be delving into those things, but it's not particularly good video fodder, so I'll do it. And as I say, if anything catches fire or anything exciting happens or we learn something new, then I'll start filming it. But it looks like the next video is going to be showing you when this is finished in a couple of days' time, and I'll be moving on to door cards. No, the next most important thing is I have found some rust in the chassis, so I'm going to be underneath sandblasting it. I'm going to literally tip this thing up on its side. I'm going to jack it over like we did in the circus, putting the big top up, and I'm going to get the thing teeter-tottering on its balance point, and then I'll strop it up to the tree, and I'll get under here and I'll get underneath and wet sandblast all of the areas that I need to work on, and then I'll be gilsoniting the chassis. Gilsonite is my favourite almost paint. It's part way between a tar and a paint. It's bitumen based. It's been around for over 150 years. It was the paint that was used, sorry, calling it a paint, it was the protective coating that was used on the Model T Ford chassis, and there's plenty of those still around in collections that are original and still with that original paint on them.